Ah, tea time.
Welcome everybody, Souldin of the Grin brothers here, and it's time for another episode of Tea Time. Now then, for today's tea, I'm going through my English tea shop collection I got around for a Christmas present, and I am now trying Apple Rosehip Raspberry Ripple. It's an organic hibiscus herbal tea. Brew time is 4 to 5 minutes. I've brewed it, I don't know, let's say 4.5 minutes. It was a little bit unclear of the timing. I sort of was looking away and the clock suddenly said it was the time I was going to pour my tea in, so it's not quite precise. It's probably like 4.3. You know, it's in the middle somewhere. It's, of course, the brand is English Tea Shop. And information on it, it's a superfruit tea full of summer memories. This caffeine-free hibiscus tea contains lots of sweet apples and juicy raspberries, alongside licorice, chicory, pomegranate, and blackcurrants. Can definitely smell the raspberry to it. It smells the raspberry and blackcurrant to it. It smells a lot like some of the other berry teas I've had in the past. I've enjoyed said berry teas to varying degrees. Each one has been enjoyable. Sometimes the raspberry and blackcurrant flavour aren't strong enough though. So it will be interesting to see what category this one falls into. I feel I may not have let the kettle cool down long enough for it, which may diminish some of the taste if the kettle was too hot with a herbal tea. But I'll find out later when it's cooled down enough for me to drink. It's piping hot at the moment, as just holding the cup and it's like, ow, ow, ow. Anyway, today's tea time is going to be a slightly awkward one because it's to follow up my positive tea time I did before, if the scheduling has gone as planned. This one's going to be a bit more of a pessimistic tea time as I complain about things. And the thing I'm going to complain about is Pokemon related. In general, Pokemon in general, kind of really. Because there's been a lot of problems with Pokemon as of late. The problem with me trying to complain about Pokemon as of late is that I've actually been put in a really good mood about it recently. I blame Twintendo. His very level-headed but optimistic videos and coverage of Pokemon Sword and Shield has made it very hard for me to continue being negative. He has constantly managed to keep me lifting my spirits up, even though there's not much to really lift my spirits up. You know, there's lots of complaints and stuff, and my issues haven't been addressed so far. And yet his videos have just kept me from getting annoyed or angry or sad or disappointed in any way. Of course, I have these problems still, but it's hard to keep in that mood. So my negative video is suffering because of him. How dare you make me happy? Go check out Twintendo's channel. It's where I've been having my discussions on Pokemon Sword and Shield, and he does great coverage of the information we've been receiving about these games. However, I'm going to try and complain about problems that I've had with not just Pokemon Sword and Shield, but have been cropping up about Pokemon throughout overall. So for the title of the video, I'll call it a Dynamax problem. A bit of a misleading title because it isn't a single problem, and I don't actually have a huge problem with Dynamax in of itself. I mean, I have a problem with Gigantamax, but not with Dynamax, funny enough. But, you know, a Dynamax problem, it's a big issue, but it's a collection of issues, really. So let's see where to begin with it. Well, as I said, I guess I should focus on the problems with Pokemon Sword and Shield itself. I have no problem with Dynamax. I mentioned that I have no problem with Dynamax. I did just mention that I have a problem with Gigantamax. And that's because Gigantamax actually is a problem that the Dynamax actually fixed. Dynamax fixed Gigantamax in the fact that with the previous gimmicks, it's kind of been an annoying trend with Pokemon that they've introduced a gimmick which they again get rid of, but this is a common problem that Pokemon has had. There have been so many problems with Pokemon, and honestly, the whole situation with Sword and Shield, the National Dex situation is just a straw that broke the camel's back. And in the case of the Dynamax thing, I saw it as a solution to the problem they had with their previous gimmicks. Mega Evolution was only meant that certain Pokemon were viable for it. For instance, in X and Y, because it's a new gen, I only used new gen Pokemon. But none of them had Mega Evolution, so I never got to experience Mega Evolution myself during my Pokemon X playthrough. And the other problem with Mega Evolution is it takes a lot of work to suddenly do a new model and everything, and that's a model that could have just been done for a standard evolution for some of these Pokemon, instead of, or in new Pokemon entirely. There's a reason why the Kalos region only had around 80 additions to its Pokédex. I'd have loved if instead they actually introduced some other bug, ground, and poison types. My 3 favourite types, and they had one of each in X and Y. Like, my choices were Vivillon, Diggersby, and the war type that Ravi had, Dragalga? I can't remember his name. Maybe I'll have it pop up on screen. But it was like a water poison, then it became a dragon poison. But yeah, there weren't much variety in that, and part of the problem with not being able to introduce more Pokemon was because they were modelling the Mega Evolution. Meanwhile, Z-moves had, kind of fixed the problem, but they didn't feel very Pokemon-esque, I'd say. It felt very typical. It's like, oh, it's just a super move. It didn't, it was kind of uninspired. Dynamax feels more inspired. It feels cartoony and goofy in a way, and in a way that fits the tone of Pokemon a lot more. And in theory, it shouldn't take up any more, programming time, because all you have to do is upscale a model. Apparently, people have been claiming the Game Freak / Pokemon Company / Creatures Inc. have been making an entirely separate big model just to take into account the stormy dark clouds, which wouldn't surprise me. After all, there is the repeated lily problem, where they ended up making a lily for every individual island in Pokemon Sun and Moon. Not quite confident in the quality of the programmers at Game Freak, frankly, if that is the case. But Dynamax seemed to fix all those problems. And then Gigantamax came along and ruined everything about it. Suddenly you have newly created models for some of these Pokemon, as well as specific Pokemon who can only use it, and very specific, and even more specific of these kind of Pokemon. Now, if people want an Alcremie or a Corviknight, they're just going to go after the one you get in a raid bout, and there'll be specifically tons of people trying to use those specific ones, neglecting the actual Alcremies and Corviknights because they're the lesser versions. They're the ones without the Gigantamax form to them. And, that's kind of the problem with having these specific things, these like Mega Evolution-esque sort of things. People will then focus on those specific Pokemons instead. And that's a real shame, because Dynamax, I felt, was a nice little situation. And then they ended up ruining it by having the whole Gigantamax concept. Again, the reason why all this complaint has been, drama has been, with Pokemon Sword and Shield is the national dex. And I guess I should explain my thoughts on that. I don't care about the national dex, really. Like, as I've just mentioned, when I start a new Pokemon game, I only go for the new gen Pokemon. Maybe in a third version, I'll have some of the older Pokemon. In White 2, I had the idea of having one Pokemon from each generation, plus one extra for Gen 5 because the starter. National Dex itself has no problem for me, because Black and White was my preferred way of doing it, where until post-game, you only had exclusively the new generation of Pokemon, and I never bring my Pokemon along, preferring to keep them in the games that I use them in. But I can understand the complaints from people, and it is the straw that broke the camel's back. And the bigger problem with it overall is the complaints. Is more like the excuses that were given for the National Dex situation is the bigger problem. They're saying, oh, we've been doing this for higher quality animations, which then never got shown off. And I never really cared too much about the animations of Pokemon, but when they pointed it out that they were spending that time on high quality animations, suddenly that became a focus, and it's like, well, they clearly haven't, sort of thing. That's really disappointing that they haven't. I would have not even minded at all if they never brought that up, and it's like, oh, double kick looks lame, but it wouldn't have been an issue to me until they brought it up. Their excuses are kind of the problem with it all, saying they can't do this and that and that and that. And another problem I had with it is them saying that we always thought it'd come to this day with like 1,000+ Pokemon sort of thing, taking into account forms. That's kind of a problem I've been having with Pokemon in general. They've been introducing all these unnecessary fluff things, all these unnecessary additional forms, far too many legendaries per game. Again, the Mega Evolution concept is basically additional forms. Like, did we need alternative forms like Landorus, Thundurus, and such? Who uses them outside the competitive scene? Like, I personally, as a rule I make with my playthroughs of Pokemon, I never use any of the legendaries. They are just obstacles to me. They're kind of annoying, actually, in the fact that I have to catch them sort of thing, rather than just beat them and be done with them sort of thing. Because I don't, I will never use one myself, so there's no point in me catching them. They're just a challenge obstacle to overcome, and they're not really that tough of an obstacle if you're purely fighting them. The challenge for them is purely in trying to catch them, and that challenge method kind of got removed when quick balls were introduced, and you just repeat repeatedly. Just throw a quick ball, didn't work, reset. Throw a quick ball, didn't work, reset. I did that against a Mega Alpha. I did against the what were they called? The kind of Mega Evolution, but Primal Evolved Kyogre. I did that like for 2 hours. Did it, done. And then Kyogre got shoved into a PC and never used. And they've introduced all these legendaries. They didn't need to introduce so many legendaries. It kind of ruins the factor of them being legendary if there's so many of them. And, that's a lot of fluff. They introduced a lot of fluff with, like, Gen 3. Like, honestly, they should have seen this coming with Gen 3 when they realised that Pokemon's so big it's going to go on and on. And yet Gen 3, when they introduced Double Battles, they introduced Pulse and Minun, Volbeat and Illuminous. Silcoon and Cascoon, you could have easily just had Wurmple evolve into one Cocoon and then split off into Beautifly Dustox. You didn't introduce both Silcoon and Cascoon. There's a lot of Pokemon that feel I needed. Alolan forms / Galarian forms, a lot of people like those, but honestly, I have big issues with them. I don't like them because a lot of the times they feel like they should have been new Pokemon, but they're not at the same time. Like, they feel like they're so different from their original concept that they might as well have been entirely different Pokemon. They just didn't go through with it. I'm particularly annoyed in this most recent case where it seems like the Badger-based Pokemon I'd been hoping for the Galar region, given it's UK-based, is suddenly a part of Zigzagoon's evolution. That, to me, doesn't count as a new Pokemon at that point. I previously counted new evolutions, and it's also unfair to a regular Zigzagoon. Now, regular Lanoon and regular Zigzagoon, there's no point using them because the other Galarian Zigzagoon can evolve. It's got a huge advantage over it by that alone, because it's going to get those buff in stats. I've never been a big fan of the Galarian or Alolan forms. I've been critical of them from day one. There have been a few exceptions where I think they are good ideas. Alolan Executor, I think, was a well presented idea, and Alolan Raichu, because they still felt like they were part of the same Pokemon evolution line. They still had a typing similarity. Like Alolan Marowak, I feel it strays too far, and it doesn't even have a ground typing to it anymore. It's Fire Ghost. It's too different at that point. And I'm not a fan of, again, like they've got that back, and again, it feels more like that they've blown the Pokemon roster more than they ever needed to. It feels like these could have just been actually original Pokemon, and likewise, they didn't need all these form changes. They didn't need as the abundance of legends. They didn't need Pokemon that felt copy and paste. Before, back in the day, if they wanted a Pokemon who was similar in design, they wouldn't just call it an alternative form. I mean, Pidgey and Pidove coexist at the same time. It's not an issue. Gen 5 in general has a lot of Pokemon clearly inspired by, Gen 1 styled Pokemon, but they weren't just called Unovan forms of them. They were their own original Pokemon. And of course, every game has its Pidgey, every game has its Rattata, and they're distinct Pokemon, It's Rattata and Sentry and Bidoof and such. They're not like just, here's Hoenn Rattata sort of thing. And that's kind of annoying to me that, they're going to a situation where they're going to have to take away Pokemon, but it feels like they made that problem themselves. Of course, other of the problems have always been well documented. Event Pokemon have always been a nuisance. The removal of lots of features has also been very disappointing. I love Pokemon contests. They got rid of that in sort of Gen 5 onwards and didn't return to it until Alpha Sapphire and Mega Ruby. I'm not sure why they removed them. It's a really cool feature to do, but they removed them. They introduced PokeStar Studios, got rid of that. They introduced Inverse Battles, honestly one of my favourite battle types, and yet they introduced that for one match, and then they never focused on it. They introduced all these new sort of unique modes, triple battles, rotation battles, sky battles. Admittedly, I feel the sky battles didn't work well in terms of concept, and they should have been inverse battles instead. Inverse battles being the one where all the types' advantages are switched. Suddenly, ice type becomes really effective. Really useful. Whereas before it was terrible for resistancing. In the they always introduce these cool little sort of new modes, little mechanics, little things. They introduced with the triple battles, they introduced the triple combo sort of thing where Fire Pledge, Grass Pledge, the free pledge moves like the Fire, Water, and Grass Pledge moves did a combination sort of thing. Why didn't they focus more on that? It's like they come up with these inklings of ideas, but they don't delve into them enough. Or they'll come up with this cool concept but think, no, it's exclusive to this region, rather than allowing it to evolve. And they'll end up, okay, of course, sometimes some of the ideas don't work. I mean, I don't think Triple Battle was really that good of an idea. It felt just Double Battle, but just additional Pokemon. Rotation Battle felt more unique. Inverse Battles felt more unique. Sky Battles I don't think worked too well either. But that doesn't mean they couldn't focus on the things that did work, like the Pokemon contest, and just make them better and better and better. And, you can always think of similar things in other countries that can work well. Maybe for the Galar region, you could have the Pokemon contest as basically being folk festival sort of thing. And sort of village festivities and traditions and such sort of thing. Have it in place of that, but it's still the Pokemon contest gameplay sort of thing. It's just, it's just baffling to me that they introduced so many of these cool features and then proceed to get rid of them. I didn't think skating worked, but I loved sneaking, and it was really disappointing that sneaking was removed because from after Alpha Sapphire and Mega Ruby, because I liked how you were able to obtain hidden ability Pokemon easier that way, because otherwise it's basically a competitive only thing. It's purely post game sort of thing. let's see, other things to complain about that have just been building up. Battle Frontier is another thing that they've been getting rid of, sort of thing, and not been keeping around, but it's great post-game content. Let's see, things to complain about that I haven't mentioned. I've made a little list. Lack of difficulty options. Oh my gosh, this is my biggest gripe. Probably one of my biggest gripes. Like Sun and Moon, some of you may know I didn't enjoy. It was a boring slog. I didn't care for the region. I felt a Hawaii-based region was a very poor decision right after Hoenn region. The sunny setting didn't really strike for me because we'd just basically been there. We basically went to Alola just before it. And the story, I wasn't a fan of the characters for some reason. A lot of the characters didn't rub me the right way. It was a little bit too happy-go-lucky. I ended up agreeing too much with Team Skull in most of the points, which isn't a good thing. They did fantastic with Luzamine as a villain, and then proceeded to ruin her in Ultra Sun, Ultra Moon, but hey-ho. And the difficulty was terribly done. It was terribly misbalanced. Like, for the most part, it was super easy, and then you get these odd difficulty spikes. Here's Salandite with Dragon Rage at level 20. Here's the Aether Foundation, where we've suddenly got a huge difficulty spike in it. Here's the Elite Four. You have spent so long playing this game, easily destroying these trainers with only like 2 Pokemon, and now it's to the point where you've forgotten that trainers can actually use items. Like, I didn't realise that the Elite Four could actually use healing items because I'd been decimating everyone in the game, so to the point where they never used it. Heck, Luzamine's Beware only has 3 moves, and it can't hurt Mimikyu because it's got nothing to hit a ghost type. It was hilarious. And, and they had a difficulty option before, but they did it in such a stupid way. They had it in Black and White 2, and you had to, complete the game and then trade over the difficulty option. It was just baffling. I want to see difficulty options return, and they've never done that. They've made the games easier and easier each time. And it's and when they do have difficulty, they balance it really poorly by just having as spikes rather than having a consistent progression. And oh my gosh, not everyone who plays the games are children, and Game Freak clearly must know that. And I appreciate, child-friendly games, but there's always, the best way to do them is always have some form of difficulty at some point. Kirby series, for instance, yeah, the main game isn't that challenging, but you get to the arena mode and suddenly it gets really hard sort of thing. But I want some of the challenge, I want a smooth transition of difficulty within the Pokemon adventure, and they've never done that as of late. It's, they've always kind of just, as I said, just spike up randomly. And another thing that I don't think people talk about often, but I have as a personal gripe, is evolution methods. They've really overcomplicated evolution methods. That's been a problem since all the way back in Gen 2, when they decided to introduce at the same time adding an item to a Pokemon and then trading it rather than just giving it the item to the Pokemon in the first place or just trading it. Trade evolutions in them themselves is problematic because they don't work as I think Game Freak intended to them. Like the Pokemon anime sort of had it, so you're trading away the Pokemon, you're sharing a friendship sort of thing. But what people do with trade evolutions, they trade it to them and say, oh, could you trade me that back? Okay, here you go. Here's your evolved Pokemon. They don't actually swap the Pokemon. That's why that one bug type, the Shelmet and Carablast, how you had to trade specifically for them, I think that worked a little bit better because, they were version exclusive, and people might actually have incentive to keep the Pokemon they get traded instead of just trading them back. But I feel not many people actually ever did that, and, they complicated it by, here, have an item and then trade instead of just give the item. And then there was, items specific to only certain Pokemon, like the Magmatizer and such. Why not just use the Firestone? You already had an elemental item for it. They made too many specific items and too many specific methods to trade certain Pokemon. The odd one here and there, that's a funny sort of thing. Have it so to evolve Inkay, you have to flip the 3D episodes down. That's ingenious. But Eevee with Leafeon, just give it a Leaf Stone. And you can't even say, oh, it's because we didn't have an Ice Stone. When they needed to evolve Alolan Vulpix, they just they invented the Ice Stone for it. And yeah, just so many. A lot of these tiny little problems have been building up over the years, and the National Dex situation has just let the floodgates open. For some of them, might not be problems that certain people have. Again, people are probably focusing more on the National Dex, the animation sort of thing. I don't really care about the animation sort of thing. I'm not playing Pokemon for its graphical capabilities. It's enjoyable regardless. I mean, I have a bit of a personal favoritism towards the old sort of sprite-based gameplay, and even if they were static, it's not too much of a problem. The slight movement here and there, that's good enough for me. But I have other problems, as you've probably just heard me talk, as I've grown and grown on about, and they've just kind of built up, and in a sense, I'm kind of happy to see this playing, because I complained so much with Pokemon Sun and Moon. I felt very isolated in that experience because no one else was complaining. It's nice to know that other people have been noticing these annoying little factors, and it's just that they were able to ignore them beforehand, but now finally that it's been too much for them, and they've also been expressing their annoyance with these little things. Felt I was the only one. I'm glad there are some people who do actually feel my own gripes as well. Anyway, that's pretty much the tea time, but I'm going to try this tea first before I conclude things. Let's see, it's the, whoops, I throw the book over there. Oh, well, wait, did I not bring I didn't bring the little triangle pyramid tea bag container in. Oh, whoops, how did it? The Apple Rosehip Raspberry Ripple Tea. Here we go. Okay, you know how I said about I was worried that its flavour wouldn't be strong? No worries here. That is a very strong flavour. Gone really quickly, though. Okay, a little subtle hint of it back. It's like a really strong raspberry and blackcurrant flavour, and then it quickly dissipates. Maybe I'm just not hitting it on my tongue correctly. That's a little bit better. Really strong, but the flavour goes away too quickly. It's a really nice burst of flavour. Maybe I should have kept it in for a little bit longer, or maybe it needed to be cooler. But the flavour's not been diminished, so that wasn't a worry. But the flavour, ironically, the flavour itself diminishes quickly. Like the flavour itself is strong, and then it disappears. Like Thanos snap. I'd be useless with the Infinity Gauntlet. I can't even snap my fingers without, a glove on. Yeah, but that was the Apple Rosehip Raspberry Tea. An okay one, but strangely enough, it tends to be a problem with these raspberry and blackcurrant teas. A lot of them tend to be strong in flavour, but the flavour goes away too quickly. There was only one, I can't recall which of them from my book, that actually had the flavour linger for longer, and that was my preference for them. But this one, no, it's a strong burst of flavour, and then it disappears. Shame that, but at least it's a good flavour that you get in that short experience. Kind of would work as well as, I kind of guess, a shot glass tea? If that's even a thing. In any case, that's my tea time on my problems I have currently with Pokemon in general. Talking specifically about the games, or complaining about the anime some more, or the trading card game, or anything like that. These are the problems I personally have been having, but I know others will be having different problems, different things that have come out when the straw broke the camel's back for the whole natural situation. Maybe some people are overlooking the problems and not having a problem with it at all. Or, maybe it's just, I have these problems, but they're not enough to dent my optimism for the game. I would agree, I would have been in a downward sort of mood myself. I'm still not even had enough Pokemon revealed to make a full team yet. I've got Grookey on my team as a definite, and I may be having Duraludon and Impidimp, but they're only maybes at the moment. Maybe Roly-Poly as well. Trying to avoid having a rock type, and I've heard Grookey's already going to be part rock, and I hate type clash, but Roly-Poly is a really cool design. But hey, who knows? But again, like I said, Twintendo has been keeping me very optimistic, so even though there's nothing that's quite striking me yet, and there's all these problems that I'm worried about, I'm still looking forward to it. I'm still going to go in with a more positive attitude. Hopefully it will help me, and I feel it's going to take a lot of bad things for it to get as negative a reception from me as Sun and Moon did. So hopefully it'll never come to that. But these were just my problems. You may have different problems, yada yada yada. So feel free to tell me what you thought about my problems with the Pokemon series of late. This my Dynamax problem, as it were, with the series overall. And feel free to share what problems you've been having. It's always good to, in a way, without being rude or anything, it's always nice to be able to express your negativity and sort of share with others. Let out your pent feelings in a calm and well-considered manner, and it's good to discuss those sort of things. It'll make you feel better. So, hope you enjoyed this tea time, and cheerio!